Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another MAMJ Let's Play. Today I'm starting a brand new visual novel style game. And I know some of you guys are going to be a little bit upset with me because I haven't done anything else with Root Double. Now, hear me out. I did actually film a 2-hour long episode of Root Double, but it hasn't gone up yet because I haven't been able to consistently maintain that upload schedule. So I didn't want to do one and then tease you guys and not do a different video. But this game here, the Sekimeiya Spun Glass, is actually going to be very interesting. And I think it's going to help you guys tide over until I'm able to go back to Root Double, because this game is very recent and it's by a smaller team, Trinitite team, I think. Yeah, that's right. And actually one of their members had reached out to me about this game and it just came out this month. I know I'm a little bit behind the times in getting this video up to you guys, but yeah, I want to play it. I want to see what it has to offer. I'll watch the trailer. I don't know what the... Oh, I can skip languages. And oh, this is... Yeah, nice. Okay. I have no idea what language the actual default game is in, but that's fine. Okay, so let's go back. Where am I going? Start? I guess we're diving into it. Yeah. I guess we'll just dive into it. Sorry, my brain is a little scrambled. I'm really excited for this though, because watching the trailer, it has very strong Root Double and 999 vibes, games like that. So for those of you that can't watch a 2-hour long video, maybe this will help. I don't quite know what I'm gonna do with this, but I want to play it because it's new and it's something from an indie developer. So we'll just see. We'll see what everybody thinks of this game and we'll just go from there. Okay. I'd been mindlessly staring at the wall in front of me for a few minutes. When that finally registered, I slowly spun around. I'd always thought I'd be quick at adapting to sudden changes, but I'd recently realized how mistaken I'd been. Still unable to process everything, my brain kept struggling to accept that the previous few days had really happened. What do you mean? I wasn't familiar with the walls around me, but I'd always known of this place. Next to me was Shiroya, less willing to acknowledge her surroundings. Keeping her gaze on the floor, she suddenly spoke for the first time since we'd entered. I think it'll be time soon. Yeah, probably less than 20 minutes. That was all I managed to muster. Even though I was still the same Atsuki as always, it felt like I'd been rewritten into an entirely different entity in only a few days. I didn't try to say anything else. During the previous 2 weeks, I'd grown accustomed to those brief interactions with Shiroya. After I spoke, the lost look in her eyes returned. We had both agreed to come together, but it seemed like neither of us knew what we were doing. We kept awkwardly scanning the vast hall, moving forward tiny steps at a time and awaiting further instructions. Neither of us had any strength. I'd known Shiroya for more than 15 years, and not once had she looked so empty. On top of everything, I hadn't been able to make her feel any better. Despite that, at almost 9, we were inside the Ashiya Tower. The biggest building of Yushibana, the town where we'd always lived. It was situated on the outskirts, and we had never entered it before. From the outside, the tower's contrast with its surroundings was immense. Beyond all similar looking houses, its size made it visible anywhere in the town. It was the contrast which had caused it to be called the tower, but it was only as big as an urban building. The structure itself was more or less a cube, essentially as wide as it was tall, but it seemed to be towering to the people who had spent their whole lives in a rural area. It was a place Shiroya and I had always avoided because of the stigma associated with it. A large portion of the citizens were against its existence due to the people who owned it and its unnatural size. I wasn't very familiar with the topic. Apparently, decades ago, when the building hadn't been anywhere near as large, it had been the Ashiya family's residence. It was known that they were a shady family, but they never suffered any consequences. At the time, they had a silent power over the town, and over the years, it gradually grew stronger. They became the image of Yushibana. Anyone visiting from the outside knew about that family before anything else in the town. Over the years, the old residence transformed into a focal point for business and tourism. I had never immersed myself in the matter, but that was common information that I couldn't even recall where I had heard first. The place was some sort of museum, and behind it extended a mountain range that encircled Yushibana. It was known for housing numerous caves that held valuable gemstones, so enthusiasts tended to visit often. The Ashia family had taken advantage of this and utilized the building as a gallery for the different gemstones that could be found in the nearby mountains. And when that happened, the part of the town in favor of the towers strengthened due to the increase of people who specialized in those gemstones. That was what caused a split in the population. The younger residents generally didn't mind Ashia, while the older maintained their private discontent. That was why we had never entered it. And on top of our more recent circumstances, I thought Shiroya might have been experiencing a feeling of betrayal for simply being there. While I couldn't say I shared that strong of an emotion towards it, I wasn't very fond of the whole thing either. The reason why we were inside wasn't one I could easily put into words. There had been constant publicity about the day's event for 2 weeks. According to Ashia, they were going to showcase a major discovery, one found in the very same mountains around the town. But that wasn't something that particularly interested me, and I wasn't sure what to expect. The reason we had come to the tower wasn't anything as simple as curiosity. It was December 15th. Outside, the environment was cold and coated in snow, and while the temperature inside was regulated, we'd been outside for so long that we still felt unpleasant. I glanced at Shiroya, who didn't return my look. Feeling slightly agitated, I turned a little. I could see a line of people who had come thanks to Ashia's ambitious advertisements. Shiroya and I had been at the front of it for a long time. Next to us was a man I'd never seen before. He was tall and had dark hair, and like us, he seemed distant from anyone else. I hadn't seen him so much as look at me, so I hadn't given him a second thought. We were next to him because we could go see the gemstone in groups of 3. Since we'd been the initial 3 to show up, we formed the first group. The entrance fee had been expensive, but we'd paid it well in advance. From our perspective, it had been worth it. We remained by the door that would open at 9, simply waiting for that to happen. At our left was another door that would open at the same time, and according to what we'd been told, both led to the main floor of the tower. On that particular day, not many people seemed to care about that, as everyone who could be seen was part of our line. For a moment, I wondered what the big deal was. Yushibana wasn't a large town, so the amount of people waiting behind us was fairly impressive. All that for a gemstone didn't seem quite right to me. But perhaps it made sense, given that it was Ashia's event. They cared about appearances, as anyone could attest. There were in many lines of business, and the most important one was looking good. Apart from the line, the only other people in the lobby were guards talking with a policeman, a woman behind the reception desk checking everyone's tickets, and a janitor who had been scrubbing the same part of the floor for a while. It was all unsettling and alien. The event itself was an abstract thing to me, and on my view on the people who ran it, it was far from positive. All I could do was look at things and wait for it to all start. We'd been asked to leave our phones outside for the duration of our stay, as nothing of the sort was permitted in the building. That meant that I had no way of looking at the time. There weren't any clocks on the walls. Adding the fact that the person I was with was clearly uncomfortable and trying to hide it, the long wait had been much more tedious than I'd hoped. This seems like we're gonna be in some kind of experiment, you know what I mean? I continued looking at her, not knowing how to deal with the situation better. Finally, after minutes of looking down, she suddenly lifted her head as if she just remembered she was in a public environment. Following behind, she looked at me and seemed to try to smile. But it was barely visible before vanishing again. I kept falling back into negative thoughts. No matter how I tried, I couldn't help that. I needed to be stronger and to help lift Shiroya out of the pit she was in, but that was tricky, seeing as I had to get out of the same one. So I struggled against my feelings, wishing all the while that I could go back to how things had been before. Minutes later, a well-dressed man who'd been standing near the entrance told us that if we weren't waiting for the event, we could go through the left door. If we weren't? So if you're waiting for the event, you still have to stay. Shortly after, a tall blonde woman wearing a suit entered through the one on the right. I'd seen her in the coat earlier, before she disappeared through one of the doors. She looked over everyone present and began to explain what the procedure would be. Sorry for the wait, everyone. We'll now begin the group entrances. My name is Naomi. I'll be chaperoning today's guided visit. As you likely already know, groups of 3 will move forward in turns. Each visit is estimated to take approximately 15 minutes. Once inside, I will personally explain what we have prepared, and I will also be available to answer questions within the specified time. So we're here for a tour? Almost? Naomi's explanation was directed at everyone present, but it is hard to believe anyone farther back could have heard her. She continued on in a monotone voice. Keep in mind that phones and video cameras are strictly prohibited. I ask for all of you to please be patient and await your turn. When her scripted message was over, she relaxed her posture and directed her look at us. You 3 are the first group, correct? Seconds later, nobody had answered. The 2 people at my sides had barely paid attention to her, so I spoke before she would have to ask again. Yes. Alright then, please follow me to the event room to be the first to see the Sekimeiya. I heard that word many times recently, but before I could think, she turned around and walked through the same door she'd entered from. I looked to my right to check on Shiroya. Her demeanor hadn't changed, but she was aware of the situation. By the time I turned back, the man on my left had nearly reached the door. It seemed he was taking the initiative despite his unenthused appearance. Rather, it was probably better to think of myself as lagging behind than him being proactive. I followed, motioning Shiroya as I did. She approached me, still wearing her heavy-looking coat. We found ourselves in a long hallway. We could see many doors lining each wall, some opened and connected by a decorative handrail. However, there were no traces of Naomi or the man. Also, that's a lot of cameras! The floor seemed pointlessly wide. Up to the end of the hall, I could see a number of security cameras hanging from the ceiling. As we started walking, unclear about where to go, I found it appropriate to try and talk with Shiroya again. Are you feeling better? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. She continued walking, assuming that was the end of our exchange. I tried to press it a bit further. Do you regret coming? No, of course not. I'm seriously glad we're here. I mean it. I know how you feel, okay? It's the same for me. It doesn't help a lot to say it, but I don't want to see you sad. I'm here because I want to be, Yatsuki. I'm okay. This is where I need to be right now. Sorry, I must look terrible. She wasn't very convincing. You know this isn't something you need to apologize for. Nothing about this is your fault. I'm not so sure. I wish I didn't have to be a drag for you now. Hey, come on! If you want to leave, we still can. Don't feel like you have to push yourself for my sake. It's alright. Thank you. Come on, let's continue though. I was the one who wanted to come. Okay. We hoped coming to the exhibition would be for the better. Once it was settled that we wouldn't back out, I looked around shyly until a voice calling for us came in the middle of the hallway through an open door. You two, hurry up! The clock is ticking. Her unprofessional shout broke the silence and drew us forward. I saw her figure in a seemingly empty room, though through the other doors there were cabinets covered by red cloth. Good, we're all finally here. Now we can start. Once I went inside, I realized my initial impression had been wrong. The room would have been barren if it weren't for a single cabinet covered by a velvet curtain. The black-haired man was there, yet again looking entirely aloof and fixing his eyes on the plain opposite wall. Alright, it would be helpful if you could tell me your names since you know mine. While she said that, she closed the door we'd come through. I took notice of the security camera in one of the corners, which was fitting for the place we were in. There was another closed door on the opposite wall, so we had 15 minutes ahead of us where we would be shut inside. Naomi looked at me expectantly, probably because I'd been the one to speak earlier. Atsuki Hakutoki. Shiroya Mirana. Without being cajoled, Shidoya spoke her name. To my relief, she was looking directly at Naomi, and her posture was significantly less stiff than before. The black-haired man didn't respond immediately when we eyed him. "And your name?" "Akaro. Akaro Esata." "Perfect. Happy to meet the three of you." It was hard to read him. He looked passive, but he must have been interested in the exhibition. Naomi moved aside and placed herself before the velvet curtain. Then she took out a keyring from her pocket as she got ready to begin the introduction. As you might already know, what's behind this curtain is not to be taken lightly, and being the first public viewers is a bigger privilege than you might think. What's being kept here is among the rarest pieces that we've ever seen, and it's only been 2 weeks since the discovery. We estimate that the value of this cabinet's contents is immense. A proper appraisal has already occurred, but more estimates will come forth as everyone realizes just what we have on our hands. Part of the experience is the touch, so I'll open the glass and let you experience it yourselves. However, I must insist that you be gentle and keep your hands inside the cabinet at all times. We know, and don't need this introduction, so let's move along. You've been praising this find of yours in every advertisement. Let's see how your claims hold up. Akado's sudden input took us by surprise, but it made it clear that he did care about the event. My apologies. Let's start then. Naomi put a small key into a lock on the left side of the cabinet and turned it. Admittedly, all the build-up was making me slightly curious, but for all I knew, we were talking about a slightly shining rock. Nothing that would ever interest me very much. So why are you here? Let's stop with the teasing. Here's what you've come to see, named the Sekimeiya. With one hand, she grabbed the bottom of the curtain and began to raise it. But even though my focus should have been on the cabinet, something else took priority. When I was least expecting it, smoke rose instead of the curtain, accompanied by a familiar, putrid smell that invaded the room. What is this? Without bothering to ask myself questions, I tried to find Shidoya. Am I right? I saw her face morphing into shock. Atsuki, what? Her last word faded out quietly, and then it was then that I realized that my consciousness was getting cloudy. All of a sudden, all I could see was very dark smoke filling my field of vision. I couldn't believe it was happening again. Again? Naomi's hand had immediately released the curtain, and she was trying to steady herself while covering her nose. I couldn't find Akaro, but I looked down and saw that he had already fallen to the floor. The smoke filled up the entire room at once. In just a few seconds, my legs stopped responding, and all my efforts at getting my muscles to obey me were met with failure. At last, my entire body gave up, and I plummeted down. Thanks to the view I had from the floor, I could see Shidoya's outcome had not been any different, and from the falling noise I heard, the same could be said for Naomi. Behind Shidoya was the door we'd come through. The smoke had covered the ceiling, so everything was dark. Amidst the confusion, I was able to notice a lack of light under the door, something which should have been easily noticeable from such a dark place. When I ultimately accepted that there's nothing I could do to salvage the situation, I had a few seconds where I could only think about what was going on. Our room and its surroundings were fully silent. I couldn't hear a thing despite what had happened. I wasn't able to produce any noise. What just happened? I was able to realize how strange it was. Both doors had been closed, so I had no idea where the smoke had come from. Knowing the smoke was blotting out our awareness, I realized it had been done deliberately, and there were many reasons I could come up with as to why, going off what we'd just been told. As my remaining consciousness faded away, I could only hope I would quickly wake up to see Shidoya again. I wanted to pretend that I knew nothing would happen, but the images came back to me, seeing that hole in the floor. My heartbeat slowed and became inaudible. I knew that resisting was completely futile, so I closed my eyes, hoping to fast forward to being awake again. The thought of dying there was pathetic, but without a choice in the matter, I resigned myself to what was happening. Before all my senses had faded, the silence was broken by a loud alarm, which had taken a while to be broadcast after the appearance of the smoke. Further in the background, I briefly perceived a much fainter and rougher sound that I couldn't identify. I lay on the floor of that smoky room with 3 other people, completely powerless and clueless. Dang. Soon after the alarm played, the darkness became absolute, and all my thoughts vanished. Okay. I have so many questions. Like, so many questions. But this is interesting. This is cool. Oh, we waking up? An indeterminate amount of time had passed. I was a complete mess, and the constant pain pounded against the interior of my skull. Nothing had changed apart from the walls and the ceiling, which had been tainted by the smoke. As I realized that I was still in the event room, I tried to battle the intense headache mercilessly hammering me from the inside, focusing my vision in an attempt to spot Shiroya. There she was, still on the floor. She hadn't moved since I'd blackened out. I used all the energy I could muster to try and rise, and after a few attempts, I was able to sit up. While I crawled to Shiroya, I looked behind me. As expected, Akado's body still lay on the floor, but he was far from my first priority. I reached Shiroya and turned her to face me. Her eyes were half open, and she seemed conscious, which is exactly what I needed to see. Are you... My sense was cut off by dry coughing that took over my body. It seemed that I inhaled a bit of the smoke, but it might have meant that we hadn't been unconscious for a long amount of time. Yeah, I think so. Her eyes opened fully, and she tried to steady herself with an arm. The smoke... was it... maybe... Listen, we'll find out what happened. Just stay there for a minute, okay? Do you feel okay? Yes. I could tell that she was barely keeping it together. She must have been afraid of the worst, just like I was, but that time we'd woken up safely. I looked around me. It was a bizarre sight, and the disgusting smell was still present after the smoke had faded. The room had been painted black, and the curtains' beautiful red, the walls, the ceiling, there we go, they'd all been corrupted by an ugly dark color, almost purple. The floor, however, had not received the same treatment. It had become gray, but it was nowhere near the strong black that had consumed the ceiling. And there was something much more important that I quickly noticed. Naomi's gone. She's not here. What? You're right. Where could she have gone? The door's open. The door we'd not gone through was very slightly ajar. Naomi could have woken up and left through it, maybe to understand what had happened after seeing that we were all knocked out. Even reaching that small conclusion took a lot out of me, but the headache was beginning to fade almost as quickly as it had come on. I noticed our voice had awoken Akaro, who still hadn't moved at all. Ugh. What is this? He felt his face with his hand as he grimaced. Then he slowly stood up and attempted to balance himself while perplexedly looking around him. Hey, what's all of this? You said Naomi's gone? What just happened? I think a lot of smoke suddenly appeared out of nowhere, right? Did it knock us out? For the first time, he started the conversation with us. Before answering, I began to clean my face, as the smoke had created a sticky mask on it as well. I have no idea, but yeah, that smoke must have had something in it that made us fall unconscious. And a few seconds before I fainted, a very loud alarm went off. An alarm? I must have fallen unconscious too fast. All I remember is getting very dizzy out of nowhere and falling over. Weak! I don't think I heard it either. Did it say anything? No, it was only a loud sound. While I was still attempting to stand up, Akado walked over to open the door and look through it. I'm surprised he didn't go to the cabinet first. Oh? What the hell happened here? It's very dark, but the hallway's condition's the same. The walls and ceilings are black, and I can't see anyone. The whole hallway's covered. How much smoke was there? Everyone must have evacuated when they heard the alarm, even though it came a bit after the smoke appeared. Did you see where the smoke came from? I didn't see anything, and there's nothing here. No, but you're right. It surrounded us in an instant, and it probably appeared in this room and in the hallways at the same time. Both of these doors were closed, so the origin had to have been here, but something must have happened while we were unconscious. Why were we alone though? There were police officers outside. Why haven't they come? We couldn't answer. Still a bit disoriented, I had forced my neck to turn. The only thing in the room was the covered cabinet. However, I doubted the Sekimeiya would still be there. The easiest conclusion to reach was that the smoke had been part of an attack designed to steal it. The smoke wasn't released in the other rooms in the hallway. Everything was giving me a surreal vibe. I had no idea what was going on, but at first glance, the danger seemed to have faded away. My headache was nearly gone, thankfully. That meant that I could start thinking things through. What had happened? Why had it happened? How was I gonna find out the person responsible? Maybe I was just trying to distract myself from the reality by thinking things like that, but I had a personal stake in it. I couldn't forgive whoever was responsible. Shiraya probably felt the same way. We couldn't just ignore it, and someone was missing. The room was empty, and it had been empty before we'd fallen unconscious. The only cabinet had been with us, but if the smoke had come out of it, it wouldn't have surrounded us so fast. We had been stained, but not as much as the lower parts of our bodies. The ceiling was very dark, whereas the floor was not so much. The smoke's density must have been low. Did that mean that the origin of the smoke had to be the very center of the room? How did that make any sense? Shiraya staggered slightly. I reached out to try and hold her shoulder, but as my body was still recovering, both of us fell back to the floor. Without looking at us, Akaro walked to the door we'd entered through. It happened here too. Yeah, when I fell to the floor, I noticed there was no light below that door. Given how dark the room had become, I thought the hallway must have been just as dark. The smoke was released at the same time, even though both places looked empty. What is this about? The woman disappeared, but she fell unconscious too, didn't she? And you're right. Why is no one else here? Although those points were very strange, I was still relieved that none of us had been harmed. I lay on the floor a bit, attempting to gather more strength. When the thoughts came to me, it was calming to realize that they were different from what had filled my head recently. This room connects two parallel hallways, which were attacked alongside this room all at once. Was this done to isolate us? Someone attacked the building to steal the Sekimeiya, right? That must have been the intention. The smoke formed an easy path for whoever who had planned it to make their way here, obtain the Sekimeiya, and leave. It sounded like a messy and risky plan, but it's the obvious thing that comes to mind. The open door seems to reinforce it, even though Naomi must have been left through that one anyway. Do I have to conclude that Naomi was part of this, and while we were out, she took the Sekimeiya and left, pointing this much suspicion at herself? Being a staff member, she knew many things about the security system, and we were the first group to come, meaning out of the four, she was the only one that wasn't part of the first visit coincidentally. Or, I should say that if I knew Akaro at all. I did think he looked distant from everything else. Maybe Akaro was aware of the fact that the smoke would appear. He immediately faked his unconsciousness by throwing himself to the floor, knowing that he would avoid breathing anything from the upper half of the room. The fact that the floor barely stained proved that the smoke never came down. Once we're all out of it, he obtains the Sekimeiya. I should also consider that the smoke first arose shortly after Naomi unlocked the cabinet. This doesn't mean much given she'd fall unconscious and leave the key available to be picked up, but whoever did this didn't know much about the cabinet's mechanism. It makes sense that they'd waited until it was unlocked. But how did they know exactly when that was? Doesn't that mean that they must have been inside the room? Or again, doesn't this mean that only Akaro could have done it? Assuming his precise timing actually happened, but how did he trigger the smoke? It could simply be that he gave some sort of signal to someone else outside, but phones aren't allowed here. After we regained consciousness, he seemed to be perfectly fine physically. However, the mass difference between his body and our 19-year-old one's is very noticeable. It makes sense that the substance had a somewhat weaker effect on him. Is Akaro in possession of the Sekimeiya right now, or did he leave it somewhere else? If so, why did he come back? Only not to look suspicious? But that doesn't explain Naomi's disappearance. Also, how did the smoke appear, and why did the alarm sound late? And what kind of risky plan is this? I grimaced. I was getting too carried away. I was gonna say, you're thinking a lot without actually seeing if the Sekimeiya is missing, right? Without realizing how far I was going. In the first place, it was ridiculous to suspect anyone until I had information. But I knew. I could never let things remain as they were. Someone was responsible, and I wouldn't let them get away. I only had to bide my time. Before I could stand, I realized there was another avenue open to me. There's a security camera on the ceiling. If someone was looking at the footage, and the smoke came out of an automated system, this would make a lot more sense. However, it doesn't mean that Akado simply couldn't have been the one to wait for the automated smoke, to then follow whatever plan they had. This must have happened during the first visit for a reason. It means that whoever was looking at the direct footage would have been the one to activate the smoke system. I was doing it again, almost like a coping mechanism. I had to make sure Shiroya was really okay before anything else. When I attempted to lift my head, my body thankfully obeyed. I stared at the curtain that concealed the so-called Sekimeiya, and the substance the smoke was composed of had dried up on it. Can you stand up? I think so. Supporting each other, Shiroya and I slowly steadied ourselves. Then I realized Akado had gone to the hallway. Finally, thank goodness! What? A shout came from the same area. It was a feminine voice, which at least indicated we weren't alone. We walked to it slowly as I wiped more of the solidified substance off of myself. I was curious to see if the Sekimeiya was still in the cabinet, but we could find that out very soon regardless. So now we're gonna see if there's other people? The hallway was almost as dark as the room. The smoke had coated every light bulb, but since there were many of them, some light could make it past the barrier. The smoke had created a thorough cover on the wall and ceilings, which it must have been an intended result. It had set up a dark environment, but that couldn't have been the sole purpose. Something must have been added to the smoke to create the same effect on every surface it touched. Close to the start of the hallway, near the door Naomi had appeared through, I saw human figures. Our approaching footsteps were noticed by one, and it rose from its knees. Oh, we got more people, okay. Well, we got a guard or something. We got closer and saw two more people kneeling down. Akado was one of them, and after finally arriving to where they were, I noticed a small body on the floor. Elsa's finally waking up, thank God. Oh wow, there's a lot of people, okay. That woman was the person we'd heard. She had the little girl in her lap and was looking at her closed eyes with concern. I see, so you three were also not able to evacuate. The person who had stood up was a well-dressed old man. As he said that, the two kneeling people turned their heads to face us. But the words "not able to evacuate" sounded darker than I had expected, especially due to his rough voice. Is she okay? I think so. She's finally breathing fine. Shiroya sat next to the others and worriedly looked at the girl who had been called Isla. Next to them was a guy my age who was staring at the girl in silence. A smoke appeared out of nowhere and knocked us out. Do you know what happened? I'm afraid I don't. You were in the event room, right? Shouldn't another woman be with you? Naomi, yes, but she was gone when we woke up. Despite the dim light, I was able to discern his frown. I'm pretty sure she passed out too, but the door to the other hallway was open when we woke up. She left while you were still unconscious? That's strange. I inspected this floor a bit and didn't find her. Is that strange? Maybe she exited the building entirely. Also, if you checked the building, why didn't you see us laying there? When his look lowered again, I realized there was something very important that we were missing. Why was nobody else there? Why had the unconscious child not been taken outside at the very least? She couldn't have left. If she fell unconscious like the rest of you, she still has to be here. What? The man didn't answer immediately, so I took the time to look him over. Due to the lighting, I'd gotten the impression that he was a simple, well-dressed old man, but those weren't casual clothes. Did all of you hear the alarm that played throughout the building? After I heard it, I saw all the smoke. Those words made me realize an important detail. His shirt was white and a lot less stained than ours, indicating that it hadn't been hit by the smoke during the release. In contrast, the woman and the other guy had the same smoke pattern we did, being more stained on the top halves. The statue of the child had made her face the main target. Oh, so that's why she took the brunt of it. I'm responsible for this building's security system. When the smoke appeared, I was in the security room. I found it in the other hallway. Since today was a special day, most of the visitors were in the lobby awaiting their turn for the event. So, they had no problem leaving safely when they saw the smoke. You might know that this tower has many floors, but only this one is open to the public, and no one was on higher levels. It was a big shock to see all the smoke, so I panicked and spent a while in the security room trying to figure out what had happened. When I realized I couldn't get anywhere, I exited and began searching through the floor. It seems you were the first two groups for the first two groups of three for today's event. There we go. Yes, we were told to wait here after the first group moved forward. Oh, that's right. I remember seeing her earlier, now that I look at her closer. I also recalled seeing the three of them behind us in the lobby. I was still trying to understand the man's words though, as he said the security room was in the other hallway. At the same time, we kept cleaning the smoke off our bodies until only a few traces remained. You said you swallowed the smoke, but your clothes are much cleaner than ours. Did it not hit you? That's right. I didn't leave the room while it was in the hallway. When I said I saw the smoke, I was talking about the security cameras. Oh, I see. So, he was the person I just accused in my head. I wasn't able to figure anything out through the cameras, unfortunately. When I left a few minutes later, I saw all the walls were black. I knew he was slowly giving me information, so I didn't want to interrupt him. However, more questions were coming to my mind, such as why he didn't come across our group first. Wait, you said you saw what the hallway looked like after you left the security room. Don't you have enough security cameras to see it from there? I couldn't help myself from asking for more details. The more I tried to coast through things, the more I resisted it. I needed to know as much as possible. No, the thing is, it became useless after the smoke appeared. Instantly covered the lens of every camera was hit by it. That makes sense. It must have been why the smoke created this film on every surface it touched. It worked to disable the cameras. Yes, while I was there, I had no way to know what was happening in the hallways or in the event room. I took my time to look at the footage of all the other rooms, but didn't see anything as suspicious at all. No people either. But I should get to what's most important. The alarm that played wasn't your usual emergency alarm. It was the one that hadn't played before. I said that I stayed in the security room out of panic, but that's not all. Even if I had left, it would have been pointless. One of the special functions of the alarm is to shut down all methods of escape. This means that we have no way to leave this building and that the people outside can't enter. Although I'd kind of been anticipating those words, it was still a heavy blow. Shiroya and I looked at each other. It seemed everything insisted on getting worse. Hang on, what? You're saying that we're trapped here? How long does it close the exit for? Why? And is there no way to undo it or contact the outside? It closes all the exit routes for 12 hours. The reason, as to say, is a bit complicated and for our purposes confidential. I'm sorry, but I can't get into that. As for a way to contact the outside, there should be. We can try it. Shiroya wasn't faring well, and Akado seemed to be in complete disbelief as to what he was hearing. Hey. It's gonna be fine, okay? Yeah, okay. I turned back to the others. Barring Akado, none of them seemed very surprised about the situation. This isn't a shock to you? I already told them. Getting Isla out of here would normally have been the first thing any of us would have done. It didn't seem like the type of building to have medical equipment stored in it, so the woman must have immediately tried to extract who I could only assume was her daughter. There's no reason to think that some secret entrance existed, so I more or less had to assume that we really were trapped in here for half a day. The existence of such an alarm seemed absurd, but at first glance, it seemed like it might have succeeded at trapping whoever had been responsible for the smoke. So you're right, Naomi still has to be here. And is that it? I get that most people were in the lobby, but if someone else had entered the hallways, they couldn't have evacuated either. Is it possible for the smoke in the hallway wasn't as dense, which gave people time to run from it before the alarm went off? No, that can't be. The guy who remained quiet finally spoke. We were right here when the smoke happened. The moment we inhaled a bit of it, we were out like a light. We pretty much collapsed instantly. I see. I couldn't tell you. From what I could see from there, the other rooms in the hallway were clean. If someone had been in one, they would have been trapped too. I could recall the alarm had played approximately 20 seconds after the smoke's appearance, but it was unlikely that had been enough time for it to entirely dissipate. I can't believe what you're telling us. What does this mean? Why are we trapped here? I sincerely apologize. I'm confused as well, but there's nothing I can do. We'll have to be here all day, but I'll try to figure out what happened. My name is Kate Kuji. Or Kuiji, sorry. It was ridiculous, but we couldn't fight it. After a period of silence where nobody knew how to react, the woman spoke. She's Isla, my daughter. She's been unconscious since the smoke appeared, but her breathing's steadier now. I'm Irina. I'm Shiroya. Oh, sorry, that's the girl, sorry. I'm Shiroya. And my name's Atsuki. We came here together. How old is she? She'll be 10 in a bit more than a week. Her birthday's 2 days before Christmas. Realizing the rest of this group has introduced himself, the guy followed. I'm Sai. We looked back at the man separated from us. Akado. Immediately, the silence returned. What the hell had happened? I thought back on the wordless alarm that had locked us in. It had lacked a message, seemingly only designed to tell us that we'd been trapped. It made sense if the culprit was one of us, but not even the staff member who was still there had any idea who it could have been, which made things difficult. And the target of the attack, it had to be the Sekimeiya. There was no way it hadn't been related. The very first showing of the newly discovered gemstone being interrupted meant only one thing. Yeah, you still need to go check it. We hadn't checked whether the Sekimeiya was still in the room, but it was confirmed that it was still in the building with us, even if it had been taken out of the cabinet. The attack had been deliberate. That was the most important point. Whoever was responsible, I wanted to find them and expose them. It was deeply personal. Was it? We all glanced at Isla's pained face. After a second cough, she proceeded to slightly open her eyes. Isla, finally, are you okay? How do you feel? Irina's sudden outburst seemed to confuse her daughter. She raised her hand and blinked blearily at all of us. Looking back at her mother, she coughed weakly again and spoke. Where are we? What are we doing here? Her disorientation definitely hadn't been helped by the fact that all the walls were stained black. Shiroya seemed like she wanted to say something, but she held back and let Edina speak. We're still inside Ashiya Tower. Do you remember all that smoke? It knocked us out, and you're the last one to wake up. Edina stroked Isla's hair gently, which seemed to soothe her. Weren't we gonna go see the Sekimeiya? I was trying to remember what happened after that, but I can't. Did we ever do that? No, sweetie. We were in the waiting room in this very hallway when the smoke came out. Do you not remember? Oh, smoke? I'm not sure. Is this that hallway? Why is everything black? That's also the smoke's doing. It stained everything it touched. Shiroya finally spoke up. Isla seemed to realize that everyone else had faint black stains on their clothes, so she looked down at her own to find them almost completely clean. At her height, her head had been primarily affected, but Edina had evidently wiped off the remnants already. Do you feel okay? You've been out a long time. I was really worried. Sorry, I think I feel okay, but my head hurts. But why are we here? Why is there no light, and why are we alone? We looked at each other, and for a few seconds, nobody knew how to answer. Kate quickly decided it was his job to do so. We're not aware of what caused the smoke, but it must have triggered a special alarm that shut down all the entrance and exit methods. That means that we'll have to stay here and wait for the next 12 hours, and it's possible there's only 8 of us who didn't evacuate in time. We all slightly lowered our heads, unsure whether his abrupt explanation had been a good idea to direct at a kid who had just woken up. Isla processed all that information in silence for a minute. I didn't expect she'd take it well. But against my own prediction, she passively tossed out some words in response. Oh, I see. So we're gonna be here for 12 hours? What do we do till then? I was relieved that she hadn't reacted badly. Telling a kid to stay put somewhere for many hours was something that could have gone much worse. Sadly, there's not much we can do here. The first floor is filled with the exhibition rooms and is officially called the Crystal Floor in reference to all the gems. The upper floors are nothing but offices, and I'm afraid they're as uninteresting as they sound. They're offices? Does that mean we could use them to communicate with the outside? Is that what you meant earlier when you said that could be possible? Oh no, usually that would be the case, but the local internet connection is also something that the alarm shut down precisely to block all communication methods. This sounds really shady. The internet connection was cut? Will it be back when the exit opens? Yes, we can't access it until then. There's no phone either, and I don't have mine here. What did you mean then? How do we have any way to speak to anyone outside? The room we're at work, the security room, has a function that lets us enable communication with the outside. It should not be one out of commission. That was slightly relieving. If we were able to talk with somebody and understand the situation better, that'd make the wait much more bearable. However, it seems strange to me that a communication method wouldn't be disabled. Entirely blocking off the exit and shutting down the internet connection has seemed to indicate the goal was to fully isolate the interior. Ignoring one method sounded a bit strange, which must have meant it wasn't one anyone would know how to access. Isla stood up and brushed herself off. She seemed ready to say something else, but a nearby sound startled us. We turned to face it and we were met with a door opening. It was the one that led to the lobby. Okay. Had someone else gotten trapped? I thought until I saw Sai next to the door. Then I realized he hadn't said anything since he told us his name. His left hand was gripping the knob. Where are you going? It looked like we were all a little confused as that he was about to leave without warning. I'm going to check the lobby. I'm not doubting what Kate has said, but I'm not personally seeing the exit close, so I'm curious if it could be forced open, for example. Nobody said anything. Instead, but Shiroya, who was still sitting down, who began slowly walking towards the door. I took the opportunity to pull her aside and check on her. This was a deliberate attack, and I want to find out who did it if I can. Are you okay with that? Why are you asking me that? If you want to just hole up in a room for 12 hours, I respect it. I don't want the person or the people responsible getting away, and I think you feel the same way. Yeah, I just don't want to get caught up in something that dangerous, Atsuki. It's not like I'm some detective, I know that, but if you notice someone lying or find out something I don't, I want to know. I just figure if we're really trapped here, we should keep track of what happens. The culprit must have gotten trapped, so we can't trust anyone here. I know. Usually the police would handle this, but if the cameras were all covered, there might be no records. And if they got away, I knew perfectly well what she meant without her finishing her sentence. I'm hoping that whoever did this was stupid enough to get caught on camera before that happened, but we'll see. I know you're right, we're not the police. I just don't know who we can trust. Okay, I'm gonna end this episode right here because it's actually a little bit longer than I thought I was gonna go for the first episode, but it seems interesting. I'm really curious. There's a lot of questions. These two seem like they've gone through some stuff. And at first I thought it was gonna be a time loop thing, but it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the case. So I'm gonna leave this episode here. Hopefully you guys are interested and we will dive in next time. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed. I'll see you guys on the next time, AMJ. Let's play.